What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined by Daniel Starkand. Daniel, I have two bits of good news for you. Trey Turner is moved up in the lineup, and Andy Burns is in the house. Everything is well. Andy Burns, are you pumped?
I'm more pumped that Joe Kelly is on the mound to start the game. Everything's definitely seems to be going in the Dodgers' favor here.
Yeah, my goodness. For those that are joining us that haven't heard, Justin Turner unavailable. He's been put on the injured list. He is out for this series. If the Dodgers were to make the World Series, he would not be eligible to return for that. They replaced him with Andy Burns. If you need a second to Google Andy Burns, I totally understand it. It's a guy who wasn't even on the 40-man roster. They had to designate Edwin Uceta for assignment just to make room for Burns. But Burns is in the house. I think everybody is hoping he does not play tonight, but it remains to be seen. This is Game 5. Dodgers down 3-1 to the Braves. And here's the good news. We've been here before, right? If this is exactly how the 2020 NLCS played out. The Braves won games 1 and 2. The Dodgers scored 15 runs in Game 3. The Braves won Game 4. The Dodgers were down 3-1, and they went on to rattle 3 games off in a row. I don't remember how I felt in that moment. I remember being bummed. I remember being pessimistic. I remember I picked against the Dodgers every game from then on out, and they continued to win and win and win. Do you remember, Daniel, does this feel any different than last year's NLCS did at this point?
I'd say it feels different for a lot of reasons. I'd say last year when they were down 3-1, even though I'd say that was a better team than this one just because of all the injuries this team is dealing with, I'd say I had zero confidence that they were coming back from down 3-1 last year, and that's just because we had never seen the Dodgers win a World Series,
Yeah.
and we had never seen them come back in a series like that. So I'd say now, there's a little more confidence just because we've seen them do it. They just did it last year. It's a lot of the same guys. And honestly, the path is there. I'd say today is the most difficult game. If you could get through a bullpen game against Max Fried and extend the series, well, then you got Max Scherzer and Walker Buehler. And I know they haven't pitched great, but you at least like your chances better in those games than a bullpen game. So I'd say I'd feel more confident now than last year, but at the end of the day, it's still not a ton of confidence. I will say my stress level is kind of surprisingly low, and I guess that's just because I don't know. I just feel like the Dodgers are playing with house money at this point. I fully expect them to lose this series, and honestly, I'd be okay with that. There's just so many circumstances that were against them this season, so many injury after injury after injury. Then you got to play in a wild card game and burn your ace, and then you get in the first round a 5-game series against the best team in baseball or best record in baseball, and then right after that you got to fly to Atlanta and you don't have home field advantage in a series against a team that you were 17 games better than this season. So, and then of course, Justin Turner gets hurt in the middle of the series, which he wasn't hitting. So obviously I feel bad for JT. I love JT, but as far as on the field goes, I'm not going to sit here and say that's a huge loss. But it just seems like everything's going against the Dodgers. So I'm just going into tonight's game, already coping with them losing the series, I guess. And if they win, hey, that'd be a nice surprise, right?
Yeah, and I think you make a good point of there is this weird optimism of if we could just get through this game. If we could just get through the bullpen versus Max Fried game, then we've got Scherzer, then we've got Buehler, and things kind of line up the way that you would want them. As you pointed out, those guys, how confident should you be in either of those two guys pitching remains to be seen. But if you look back to Game 1 against Max Fried, the Dodgers had a bullpen game against Max Fried, and they actually fared relatively well. I mean, they lost that game on a walk-off, obviously. And Fried was good, but not great. He goes 6 innings, 8 hits, 2 earned runs, no walks, 5 strikeouts, just 81 pitches. They kind of get him out of the game in an early fashion. If you remember, the Dodgers on the other side, by the time he had come out, had already seen Knebel, Bickford, Brule, Gonsolin, and Vesia, and had made it. And it was at that point, it was a 2-2 game going into the bullpens. And then, of course, Treinen comes in the 9th and is the reason it gives up the run. The Dodgers lose 3-2. So there's a roadmap in front of you of how this could be done because you've already seen how it's been done. So folks joining us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, we appreciate you joining us. I'm not sure if we enjoy Aiden O'Meara for joining us, the Braves fan in the chat that's talking some smack, but I don't know. I mean, to be talking smack a year after blowing a 3-1 NLCS lead.
I was going to say, with all of the times that Atlanta sports teams have choked and the Braves blowing a 3-1 lead to this very Dodgers just last year, Me personally, I don't know how I would be able to talk smack,
Yeah.
but hey, credit to that guy.
Credit to
And
that guy.
we'll see if it works out for him, you
Yeah.
know?
And as always, thank you for the watch. If you want to click the subscribe button, Aiden, help yourself. We appreciate it. But let's talk about this one. I mean, there's a number of storylines, but let's talk about the Justin Turner one that you mentioned. Justin Turner unavailable for this game, unavailable for the rest of the season, hamstring strain yesterday. As you pointed out, I think we can be clear and say this is not a big loss for the Dodgers from a perspective of how he has been performing of late. There were conversations that you and I had about whether or not he should be in the lineup, and if he was in the lineup, whether or not he should be batting eighth. This kind of solves both of those problems in a sense. Obviously, you don't want Justin Turner to be hurt. You feel for the guy personally, but if there's any sliver of good news, it's that most years losing Justin Turner at this point in the season would be absolutely devastating. Here, it's like, all right, well, this kind of makes Dave Roberts' life a little bit easier. Here's the one piece that worries me about the Turner news. When you're sitting in the dugout today and you're down 3-1 and you're trying to hype yourself up, trying to convince yourself that this season is not dead, because look, these guys don't want the season to be dead. It's not like they're not trying. Nobody has given up on the season. I wonder if the Turner being out is a mental loss for the Dodgers. If that makes it a little bit harder for them to get up for this, a little bit harder to convince themselves if they fall down 2 or 3 runs in the 4th or 5th inning today, that they can actually come back, because their guy, Turner, who I would say is probably the team captain. I know baseball doesn't really have team captains, but I would imagine Turner is probably the guy, or at least one of the guys. You would think it would be a position player who's in the lineup every day, that kind of thing. He's an older guy, so he's one of them for sure. I wonder mentally if that impacts the Dodgers. Do you think I'm overselling that, or do you think there is a mental element to Turner's injury that could hurt the Dodgers tonight?
I mean, I think that's a fair point, but at the same time, like, it could also go the other way. Like, maybe they could use that injury as like a rallying cry. Like, maybe like, hey, let's win this for JT, or like something of that nature. I guess we're just gonna have to see how they come out and play. Like, you shouldn't feel like the motivation should be there regardless. Like, you're in the National League Championship Series, you're down 3-1, you know your back's up or against the wall. So if you need extra motivation before a game like this, then that's probably a problem.
Fair. Well, the other big storyline with the lineup is with Max Fried, the left-hander, on the mound. The Dodgers have a bunch of righties in the lineup. But the big storyline, I think, on the mind of most Dodger fans is Trey Turner batting second. So you got Mookie Betts, Trey Turner, Corey Seager, then Will Smith, A.J. Pollock, Albert Pujols, Chris Taylor, Cody Bellinger, Joe Kelly is on the mound. Trey Turner batting second. This is another guy that many Dodger fans have been saying, do we move him down in the lineup? Do we move him down in the lineup? Well, Dave Roberts responds by saying, you're right, he doesn't belong in the 3-hole. We're going to move him up in the lineup. We're going to try and get him more at-bats. Obviously, with the lefty on the mound, you like the righty-lefty matchup a little bit. I tweeted that I had a reason for optimism with Trey Turner, and this is it. Trey Turner had 2 base hits.
I've been waiting to hear this.
Trey Turner had 2 base hits off of Max Fried in game 1. It was by far his best offensive game of the series. I would have to go back and look whether those are bloop singles or infield singles, but he was 2 for 4 in that game. One of those 4 at-bats came when Fried was already out of the game. So I believe he was 2 for 3. I'll check really quick. I believe he was 2 for 3 with Max Fried on the mound. Yeah, he struck out swinging in the 1 at-bat that he had in that game in which Fried was not on the mound. So he's 2 for 3 with no strikeouts against Max Fried in game 1. So there's my optimism. You get the lefty on the mound. Trey Turner sees him well, 2 for 3. He's going to hit tonight, Daniel. Do you believe it?
Nothing quite like that 1-game sample size optimism.
We'll take it.
Look, I would love for you to be right. Like, I sat here yesterday and basically gave the Trey optimism speech, and he didn't do a whole lot yesterday. We'll see. Like, obviously, we still think he's like an incredible player.
Yeah.
Like, he's just in a slump right now. It happens. So that could end at any time. We'll see. Hopefully, he could at least get on base a couple times today. He's up in the 2 spot today, so maybe there's a little less pressure on him to drive runs, and he can maybe just focus on getting on base, which would be huge, because we know anytime he gets on base, that has the potential to be a double and maybe even a triple. So if he could just focus on that, not trying to hit the home run, but let's just get on base and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Other guys, Corey Seager was 1 for 3. Justin Turner was 1 for 3. Will Smith was 1 for 3. A.J. Pollock was 1 for 3. And then Chris Taylor was 1 for 2 with a walk as well. So those were the guys. Tony Gonsolin also had a hit off of Max Fried, in case you were wondering. So those were the guys that got hits. Again, he gave up 8 hits. So the Dodgers, 8 base hits in 6 innings. That's solid. Didn't draw any walks. Christopher in the chat points out that Fried has a career 7.71 ERA at Dodger Stadium. So some more reason for optimism, I suppose, if you're a Dodger fan. And you are getting to a point where everybody's got an off day tomorrow. So the bullpen's probably not going to play a big role in this, in the sense of having to worry about whether guys are overworked or underworked, whether or not guys pitched yesterday, at least for the Dodgers. The Dodgers are, their main guys are fully rested tonight.
Yeah.
So that's good news. You got Jansen, you got
that
Trinan.
was something I was gonna
go for it.
That was something I was gonna point out. Like, obviously, you never want to get your butts kicked in a playoff game, but I'd say if you know you're gonna lose Game 4, I'd say the way they lost it in was kind of ideal, honestly, because they were able to use all their lower leverage arms and save all their big guns for tonight. Whereas if that's like a 1-run game, then maybe you use Trinan and Kenley last night, and then you still lose that game, and then now they're not as fresh for tonight. So I guess that's one silver lining, like you said. Like, all the Dodgers' main bullpen guys are ready to go tonight, perhaps able to give multiple innings, and then there's another off day tomorrow. So I think the overall state of the Dodgers bullpen is pretty solid. To me, it's just going to come down to the offense. Like, I feel like the Dodgers, like, everyone hates bullpen games, but if you look throughout the season, the Dodgers fared pretty well in bullpen games.
Yeah, we haven't. I mean, we did no post-game show last night. I was unavailable to watch most of the game. I had a commitment that conflicted with it. Just real quick, because you mentioned the Dodgers resting the bullpen, the game getting out of hand. There are people that would say the reason that the game got out of hand, at least early on, was because of some decisions that Dave Roberts made to leave Julio Urias in longer. I mean, there was an argument that could be made that he should have been done after 3, that he should have been done after 4. He ends up completing 5. Without getting into, did he look to be full strength, et cetera, what did you make of Dave Roberts' decision to stick with Julio through 5 innings last night? Because we both said, hey, if you can get 5 innings, great. We were not imagining that would happen with him having already allowed 5 earned runs.
Right. I mean, I think at that point, they just kind of let him wear it, like, just to save their bullpen, which it's unfortunate. Like, you hate to see that happen. I feel bad for Julio personally. Like, they've asked him to do so much all season long. He passed his career high in innings, like, at the All-Star break, and they're still asking him to pitch out of the bullpen, start games, whatever the case may be. So it was clear he didn't have a good outing last night. A lot of the runs were scored in, like, the 2nd and 3rd inning. Like, I think he gave up 1 in the 5th or whatever. Yeah. So if they took him out earlier, maybe you save that run. But at that point, the way the offense was performing, there wasn't a ton of confidence there. The expectation is Julio. He's definitely not starting another game in the series. Like, maybe in a Game 7 scenario, you go to him out of the bullpen again, which I might be hesitant to do. But, I think at that point it made sense to leave him in at least a little longer, knowing that you're probably not going to come back in this one. You got a bullpen game tomorrow, so you're going to need all your guys fresh. And now that bullpen game is a must-win game, so you definitely want all your main guys ready for that game.
And just quickly on the other piece of this, did Julio Urias look to be full strength to you? Did this look like a guy who was having pitched 2 or 3 days before? And secondly, with that in mind, do you look back in hindsight and say, why didn't Julio just pitch today and go with a bullpen game yesterday?
Yeah. Yes to both of those things. I think it was pretty clear that Julio didn't look at full strength. Whether the Game 2 appearance was the reason for that, like, we'll never know. But I think it's fair to assume it had something to do with it. But also, like I just said, he reached his career high in innings a very long time ago. So it's also possible that Julio's just running out of gas. Like, he's over 200 innings this season. So I don't know. I thought it was clear he didn't look like himself. He was missing spots. His fastball velocity was a tick down, which, maybe if you're throwing 95, 96 and missing spots, you could get away with it. But 92, 93 against a good lineup like this, probably not going to happen. So, and then for the second part, I definitely would have pushed him back to today just because there was no difference. Like, you had a bullpen game in one of them and Julio in the other. So why not give him as much rest as possible? And now if you throw a bullpen game yesterday, you probably have a better overall. I don't want to say you're in a better spot, but you at least know where you're at.
Yeah.
Like, they're going into tonight's game not knowing what they're going to get from anyone. So there's a lot of question marks there. Whereas if you have Julio on an extra day of reps, you could you could think like, all right, he's going to give us 4 or 5,
Yeah.
and then we just got to piece the game together from there, as opposed to piecing together 9 full innings.
Yeah. I mean, THP, I think, makes a good point with Walker Buehler going as short as he did. Maybe that was part of the reasoning for why they didn't go bullpen game yesterday, because they needed to get 5 innings in order to not destroy their bullpen. I think they had made the Julio decision prior to game 3, though. So, I mean, obviously they could have changed their mind, but I feel like that news came out ahead of game 3. I could be wrong with that. And I mean, the other thing I'll say, I do think it's a fair point that you make, is it's hard to differentiate between what Julio is experiencing having pitched in a bullpen versus just being at the end of a long season. I looked at the StatCast numbers because I was like, all right, there's probably a point to be made in here somewhere looking at his fastball velocity. His fastball velocity was down 0.7 miles an hour. So I'm like, okay, perfect. Let's go look at his previous 2 or 3 playoff starts when he was on normal rest, normal schedule, etc., and see what happens. I go to game 1 of the NLDS against the Giants. Guess what? His fastball was down from his season average, basically the exact same amount. And so, you know, again, I didn't get to watch yesterday's game closely, and so I'm not claiming to have a clear opinion about how yesterday's played out, but it is worth acknowledging at the very least that his fastball velocity has been down in multiple starts in the postseason, and not all of those have come after random bullpen games as well. So Oscar asks, Andy Burns replacing Justin Turner on the roster. What are your thoughts? I have lots of thoughts. I don't understand it, is the headline. Again, they had to make a 40-man roster move to make this decision. The options were Billy McKinney, who, look, I'll take Andy Burns over Billy McKinney. I'll give you that, because at least Andy Burns has this prospect of maybe there's something we haven't seen yet, where it's like, well, we've seen Billy McKinney and we're not expecting literally anything from him. Burns at least provides you defense at third base, shortstop, some cover there if you were to need it. So I guess that's a positive. For me, though, it would have been Zach McKinstry. That's who I would have gone with. People saying, oh, well, the Dodgers needed a right-handed bat off the bench. This is what I keep saying. I don't care what side they hit from. If they suck, then they suck. Like, just because a lefty's on the mound, I'm not going to bring in Andy Burns ahead of Gavin Lux or ahead of Matt Beatty or even ahead of left-handed Zach McKinstry. I would take my chances with Zach McKinstry against literally anybody on the mound over Andy Burns. So that's my decision. It's a defensive piece. I kind of understand that. I don't think Andy Burns is ever going to, like, play meaningful innings. I could see if there's a spot where they need to go for a pinch hitter or something like that, and Burns just gives you a guy that can give you defensive versatility. I don't know who their backup third baseman is besides Chris Taylor right now, which I guess is part of the reason. Like, if Chris Taylor were to get hurt and
Lux, I guess.
Lux maybe, yeah, which...
But he didn't look great at third, the few innings he played there.
So, I mean, those are my thoughts. I would have taken McKinstry. You know, look, Steven Souza is on this roster, okay? So, I mean, like, the options are very limited as far as what you could do. They weren't going to go get another outfielder as far as, like, Rayleigh or somebody like that. So, I suppose Burns makes sense, but I would have taken McKinstry. But to all that point, McKinstry can't really play third base. So, if you want a guy that has the capacity to play shortstop or third base, if something were to happen to Chris Taylor or Corey Seager or something like that, then this is kind of the only guy that they had.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I probably would have went with McKinstry, but like at the end of the day, none of those options are very great. And also, like, I feel like these guys, they've been on like the taxi squad or whatever, so they've been maybe playing like simulated games to stay fresh or whatever. So we don't know what they've looked like in those games. Like maybe Andy Burns is just going out there and hitting bombs every day. I doubt it, but we haven't seen either of those guys play baseball in months here, so I'm not really sure. Like you said, I don't think that decision is really going to impact like the series. Like maybe Burns gets an at bat tonight. Maybe it's in a big spot. If that happens, like it's probably in like the 12th inning or something, but we'll see. I just hope that it doesn't, play a factor. Like if Andy Burns is on the roster and just sits on the bench for 4 hours, the same as McKinstry would have done, then it doesn't matter. So let's just go out and hit and score runs, and then you don't have to worry about the last guy on the roster.
Absolutely. Top Shelf Stuff's got a question. We kind of talked about the first part, which is why is Trey Turner batting second? But the second question is why is Chris Taylor batting where he is? Chris Taylor is batting 7th tonight. I think it's a fair question. I put this on Twitter earlier today. If you look at NLCS stats, which, yes, small sample size, 4 games, Chris Taylor's been the best hitter on the team. He's got an OPS of 1.117. Bellinger over 1,000. Corey Seager right at 1,000. Will Smith, the only other guy that's above 675. So in your estimation, Bellinger, you can at least make sense of against a lefty why he's batting 8th, and we've seen a bigger sample size on the season. Chris Taylor batting 7th. Do you have any issues with that?
I probably would have arranged the lineup a lot different than they did. Yeah, I'd have Chris Taylor higher. I don't know how high. Definitely, like they got AJ Pollock batting fifth. A simple switch would have just been him, Chris Taylor fifth, and Pollock seventh. Um, is Taylor sixth or seventh? Where's Pujols at?
Pujols is sixth, Taylor is seventh.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I probably would have moved Taylor up, but like we were talking about the other day, you just never really know what spot in the lineup's going to come up in a key spot. So, maybe the top of the lineup is a little weaker, but then the bottom of your lineup is a little stronger. So we'll see. But yeah, I definitely would have moved Taylor up. Like you said, he's been consistently really the Dodgers' best hitter like all postseason long. I feel like he's gotten his hits just about every night.
Yeah. I see some negativity in the chat about Max Scherzer, et cetera, et cetera. Look, we've got all the time in the offseason, whenever that begins, to talk about Max Scherzer, to talk about some of the offseason plans. We're going to focus on this one and just see what happens. Because, hey, we've been here before. We were down 3-1 a year ago and came back to win it. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen again, but I'm just saying it's possible. Crazier things have happened, and we'll see what happens. So, Max Fried on the mound for the Braves. Joe Kelly, Dodgers pitching approach. Joe Kelly is the opener for the Dodgers. I tweeted this half jokingly, half seriously. I feel like it's not out of... Roberts is the only stumbling block. Like, Kelly just strikes me as the type of guy where if I told you Joe Kelly threw 3 innings today, like, on a scale of 1 to 100, how surprised would you be? I just feel like he's the type of guy that would have that in his back pocket to just go through and burn through the first 3, burn through the second 3, and be like, Doc, I'm good. Throw me back out there. Am I crazy? 0% chance? 5% chance?
I don't think he'll get through 3, like maybe 2. I'd say if he could give them 2 good innings, that's a really good start to this game. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't put it past him. I feel like Joe Kelly's been kind of surprising us all year. Haven't really seen too many Dodger players with a redemption arc like him over the last few years. He's been great this season. So we'll see. It's obviously the top of the Braves lineup is tough. So I'd take 1 inning. Yeah. Like if he could give me 1 scoreless inning, I'll take it. But yeah, I definitely think like kind of with each guy that's going to come in today, I don't think it's necessarily as scripted. Or at least in my opinion, it should be like, all right, do you look good? Let's keep you out there. Yeah. Do you look bad? Let's get you out of there. Like if Joe Kelly goes 1, 2, 3 on 12 pitches, to me, it would be absurd to not send him back out there for the second inning.
Yeah. And if you just start to work backwards, if you're the Dodgers, I imagine between Kelly, Treinen, and Jansen, you're hoping to get at least 4 innings out of those 3 guys and maybe 5. And maybe that's, that type of thing. So if let's say they get 4, how would you divvy up the rest of those innings? Like who are the guys that you would like to see if you've got to pick 5 other guys to pitch in this game besides Kelly, Treinen, and Jansen? Who are you going to?
I'd say Vesia's getting an inning against the top of their lineup, the lefties.
Which they did switch up, by the way. Albies is batting second. Freddie Freeman is batting third, I believe. So okay. A slight change to what we've seen thus far. But yes, still, I think it...
Still 2 of the first 3 guys are lefty there. So he's getting an inning. Now you're at 5. Corey Knebel hasn't looked great, but he's still getting an inning. That's 6. Probably another when the lefties come up again, then you go to Justin Brule.
Yep.
And now you're at 7, and then hope you could get maybe 2 out of Gratterall if he looks good. Like sometimes Gratterall goes in there and goes 1, 2, 3 on like 6 pitches or something. So maybe he has one of those and he gets 2. Him and Treinen are the 2 guys that haven't pitched since game 2.
Okay.
So I'd say those are the 2 guys that maybe you could hope to get a little bit of length out of, like 2 innings each for those 2 guys. And then, Kenley didn't pitch yesterday, so maybe you get a little more length out of him. So I think it's just going to be a case of how are these guys looking? Do we need to go get them, or can we leave them out there? And that's honestly kind of what the Braves did yesterday. And it was working. I guess it helps when everyone you bring in pitches well and the Dodgers aren't hitting anything. But they could, Snicker kind of just stuck with the guys that were pitching well, and it worked.
Yeah.
So I think that's the approach you have to go into it. Like if a guy goes 1, 2, 3 on 10 pitches, send him back out there, please.
Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting question, right? Because Sergio asks in here, do I think Gonsolin will come in? I think the answer to that is no. But right above him, Preston says Dave needs to stop being cute and needs to have these relievers get 4 to 6 outs, basically. And I think it's an interesting question, and I think it's an interesting dilemma for a couple of reasons. First of all, so the only guys who pitched yesterday are Bickford, Brule, and Gonsolin. Bickford threw 21 pitches, Gonsolin 39. So I would imagine, and Brule only threw 5 pitches, got 1 batter, struck him out. So I would imagine Bickford is probably the last guy that they want to go to.
He also pitched the day before, so it would be 3 in a row for Bickford. So that's why I didn't bring him up as someone, because normally you trust him for an inning, no question. But when he's pitched on back-to-back days, like you said, he's probably still available, but probably the last guy you'd want to go to.
Yeah, so Preston, I agree with you. I would love to see a guy who looks good get thrown back out there and continue to get outs. The flip side, the only argument against that is the Dodgers do have 6 or 7 guys that you trust who are all fully rested tonight for tonight's game. And so the flip side is you don't need to push, some of the, like if a guy struggles, let's say like trying to gives up a hit, gets 3 outs, like I don't need to be desperate to say, hey, well, I'm stuck to the plan of trying to needs to get me 6 outs tonight, because it's like, you know what? Brule is rested and Gratterall is rested. And I mean, even Evan Phillips, when he has come into games in this series, has looked pretty freaking good. And so like you have guys in the bullpen. So I think it's a mix and match. My emphasis on getting more outs from guys was like in situations like game 2 and game 3, where it was kind of like, all right, these bullpen days are starting to stack a little bit. And so, hey, well, let's think ahead. Well, today you don't have to think ahead because you have an off day tomorrow. Everybody's getting a day of rest. And so I agree, if a guy gets 3 quick outs, then yes, go for it. But if you can sort of mix and match and shuffle some guys, then I'm okay with that too, I guess is the point that I'm going to make. A couple minutes left, Daniel. Let's get to predictions. Score prediction, MVP prediction, and then a bold prediction as well. I can go first. I'll give you my bold prediction. I already kind of put it out there, and I'll reframe it a little. I think Joe Kelly goes more than 2 innings today. That's my bold prediction. I think they get something out of Kelly. I think he looks good. I think they got the starter thing. I just think back to those moments where like Lance McCullers threw all those curveballs back in the day, and you just trust a guy longer than you thought because he's good. So that'll be my crazy prediction there. MVP is a tough one. Let's see. Lefty on the mound. I'm not, as much as I want to go with Trey Turner, and I talked about him getting 2 hits, I'm not sure that's where I want to go this time around. Oh, man. Let's see. God, nobody. You know what? Albert Pujols. Give me Albert Pujols. We're due for a Pujols game. So I'll go Albert Pujols. And to everybody here's dismay, I'm going to continue a time-honored tradition, which is with the Dodgers down 3-1 in the NLCS, I'm going to begin to start picking against them. I think the Justin Turner thing emotionally hurts the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers lose tonight. I think their season ends. I'm not happy about it. And I'm hopeful this is a reverse jinx, but I'm going to say the Dodgers lose 5-2.
Okay. Unlike you last year, I still continued to pick the Dodgers, so I'm going to continue that this year. I think they're going to win 6-4, I'll say. I think, there's going to be some runs scored. You kind of stole my thunder. My bold prediction was going to be that Albert hits a home run.
Okay, well, you can have that one.
I'm going to stick with that. I'm not going to go with him for my MVP, but that's my bold prediction. MVP-wise, I'm going to go Mookie Betts. To me, anytime this team is successful, it's because of what he's doing at the top of the lineup. So I wouldn't rule out another 4-hit game or something. So that's who I'm going for my MVP. And then my bold prediction is Pujols goes yard in what could be his last game.
Yeah. It's I think within the realm of possibilities that this could be his last season. I think he's been good enough to come back in a role similar to the one that he currently has. But it's an option. Laura says I need to stop hanging out with Matt. That's a fair point, Laura. Negative Matt, who picked against the Dodgers earlier on the show, is the only other person. Again, I want to say, for the sake of the show, I picked against the Dodgers every game, starting when they went down 3-1 a year ago. I just gave up and I said it's over with, and the Dodgers won. So we're going for a little bit of that magic there as well. Let's see. Matty Man 5 says, are we going to score 6 runs against the best pitcher of the second half? He was really good in the second half. The Dodgers did hit him up okay a few days ago. So I think we feel a little bit confident there.
The Dodgers are also due to hit off the Braves bullpen. The Braves bullpen is not good enough to shut the Dodgers down the way they have been outside of game 3 when Cody hits the bomb.
Yeah. Nomo Fomo says maybe Daniel should have gone to the game yesterday. Your thoughts?
I would not have enjoyed watching that in person, so absolutely not.
But maybe things would have been different, Daniel.
I know that was that's the superstition, but at the end of the day, I would not have liked to sit through that.
Okay. Well, Jose says he's going to unsubscribe because I'm a Dodger hater. Look, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, you're a huge Dodger hater. That's why you host a show
exactly
about the Dodgers.
Exactly. It's okay. Hate, Jose says. Well, Jose, best of luck. We hope that you stick around, and we hope that I continue to be wrong about NLCS predictions down 3-1 as we were a year ago. And I hope that you don't take yourself so seriously in situations like this.
It's a reverse jinx attempt, guys. Yeah. Like, Jeff wants the Dodgers to win. Let's just be clear.
Thank you. All right. Well, that'll do it. We're here. Daniel and I will be here post-game, so join us for that. We hope that it's not our final post-game show of the year, but you never know. We're hopeful that it's not. There's some confidence, as we said, that if the Dodgers can get past this one, they had a good game against Fried in the first one. The bullpen game looked all right, that then they can get to Buehler and Scherzer in game 6 and 7. So we'll see. That's Daniel Starkand. My name's Jeff Spiegel. We appreciate you all joining us. As always, we will see you post-game.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.